So, does anybody have any questions for the panel?
So, I have a question for Rob. So, you said about you have opportunities for students like to work on some projects. So, how that works? How people can approach you? How the internship or something?
I think it would depend on what you were as where you were as a student. So if it was a master's.
Yeah, and I'm doing masters in data science.
Okay. Yeah. So if there's if you wanted to do a project, then we can just talk and we can come up with a project and I can talk to clinical people about the kind of some ideas that we could look at, and we could pilot, put together a 6-month project. Yeah. So that. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that'd be great.
If I could maybe add, sorry, just before the next question, if I could just add to Rob's answer that within the university, there's lots of students looking for projects in the same way that you're looking for projects. So, if there are interesting projects that the university can partner with at different levels, then the organisations that facilitate links between universities and industry have the links in to be able to do that.
Just to add that the university is quite a large organisation, and sometimes it can get a little bit confusing, but what we can do is if there's any conversations that people would like to have around any of the opportunities, so the short stage projects, so like more innovation projects that we can support on as the LLSA, or KTPs or PhDs and such like, feel free to come and chat to us and we can signpost you to the right people. What I'd also just say is just have a look on the website at sort of the opportunities that are there, because things are always coming up for studentships, or if there are ideas.
Thank you for all this information. I'm a lecturer, not from the University of Leicester. My question is similar to that. I have a health, life science and a healthcare background, and I'm interested in data science as well, and ethnic health, non-communicable diseases in particular. But I just don't know how to link up to all this information you've provided. How do I get involved?
So maybe from a university perspective, if we're working with another academic, is a very different proposition from working with industry. Academics set up collaborations and apply for grants and so forth. But working with, there's usually sort of networks through conferences and the usual publications and knowing who's in the field. I think people from industry find it really confusing because they're not into those networks that we're into. They don't look at that sort of science development, go to those conferences, and that's where there's different pathways, I think, for academics that are wanting to interact together from industry that's wanting to act through probably someone else who knows this sort of complex landscape within the university.
I think the way to look at it, so if there's an academic and an industry collaboration, you can come to us as the LLSA or as the sort of the wider university. I'd probably say in this instance, feel free to have a chat with us, but I would say there's always an academic and an academic sort of collaborative between universities. Like the university has the CUA, so we work closely as Leicester with Loughborough and DMU. And there's always sort of that collaboration piece there. I think sometimes it may be on a one-to-one basis, you know who you want to talk to. If it's sort of a bit wider, you're not knowing who to chat to, I'm happy to have a chat and sort of see who the best people would be to have that conversation with.
Okay, thank you.
Lucy?
I have a question for you on the sort of the developments from TREs up to the data environment. Do you have any more detail, or is it going to be sort of kind of coming out as it develops? Who's leading it from a national perspective, and how easy is industry to use it?
So I don't know who's leading from a national perspective. Andrew Hoare is from Nottingham, who you probably know, is coordinating the East Midlands part. This is at the very early stage of developing a business case to apply for the funding, and I think that actually interaction with users is coming out as a really important thing that we need to do, both the academic users, in that I want to be able to this to be configured for me to use it, but also I think for industry and innovation partners to be able to use this system as well.
I think there's certainly certain companies at Charlotte campus who would probably be interested in understanding if there's some way they can at least understand what might be coming and how we could feed into the utility of it.
I think the answer is I can't describe what's coming because I think it still needs to be designed, but that design bit needs to involve the wider community of health data that looks perhaps beyond the university's view of health data science.
Hi, I'm Mel Paul, I'm a data scientist, and I just had a question about what you foresee as challenge going from innovation, great ideas, you put it in proof of concept, great, it works, you develop the model, it works, everything's great, but actually speaking to a lot of people about AI, this big scary element that, oh my God, it's going to take, very scary. Do you see any barrier or challenge to implementing great technology, great product, which, great models, but actually once you talk to clinician or patient, there's a blockage that actually, public, England-wide dissemination and adoption of that technology is actually, it doesn't actually get there because it's not technology that's failing to work, it's just the adoption of that technology for everyone to use.
I mean, there is an issue with generalisability of these models as well in a lot of cases, and therefore you have to have those big validation studies as well, where you're accessing large data sets. Things like the secure data environment are actually going to help with that type of thing. There's also presenting models in a way that the clinicians trust. So using interpretable approaches or trying to simplify models where possible so that they are understandable and the reasons why the models are making those predictions is clear.
So it may come along to the implementation part, but I see a key part in some data science projects that's missed is the human factors and psychology part of implementation of whatever it is into a clinical workflow. And it's no use having the best predictive algorithm in the world. We did one for prediction of hospital discharges, which is a really good thing, and then found it's not being used by the team that's in charge of that because we hadn't really thought about the human factors of the process of decision making around that activity. So I think that you've got to think of the whole way through to get the implementation bit right. And you've probably got to think about that when you're trying to implement. It's too late to think about that.
And that's where one side that the East Midlands Academic Health Science Network would help with the value deficit, isn't it?
And that's it, we're trying to bridge that gap between we know this works and we know it's a problem out there, and how can we sort of convince people that it's clinically safe to use that rather than using somebody's judgment as well. So I would encourage, if research has been done to prove that it works, that coming to us is probably the next step to have that conversation around who could we speak to try and implement this.
Tim, you said there's 50 apps on your phone. What stops it from making, this is just another app, which you can't use 51 app on a daily basis?
Absolutely. So, I think that's where you've got to talk to the user and think about that integration into a clinical workflow right at the beginning of the process, and have that as part of the development, right in from the beginning.
Just to follow up on that, the data protection view, and the GDPR is for processing data, and also from a clinical point of view, there needs to be a way in the apps for the clinician to overrule. I'll give you an example. When I went to my doctor, I had a few hot chest pains, and the doctor's like, "Can you get down here fairly quickly?" Yeah, that's fine. It turned out to be nothing in the end, obviously. But he was like, he went through all the triaging system, which was an automated system, and he's going, "Yeah, I don't like what I'm seeing manually. The triaging system says you don't need to be referred," but he says, I've done this job for 20 years. I'm going to fudge the figures slightly and get you in just to double check. And I think that it comes to that point where
We do that the whole time because all of our scoring systems, we use loads of scoring systems, they are designed for the average patient. When I'm talking to you, you're not the average patient. Each of you has some characteristics that makes you not average. So part of what I'm doing the whole time is thinking, how does this particular tool that I've got, be it, a scalpel if you're a surgeon, whatever, or an algorithm, how does this apply to this individual? And that's where I think some of the work in the BRC, particularly around underserved populations, whether it's ethnicity or economy, it really is useful in this area. But I wouldn't worry about lack of interpretability, because I don't understand most of the stuff that I use, most of the tools that I use. It works, it gives me a number. I don't understand how this box actually works. So although people say AI, because it's not interpretable, is not going to be trusted by clinicians, I'm not sure that's right. If it's shown to work and there are good clinical studies, in the way that I understand good clinical studies, if randomised controlled trials, etc., then I'm going to use it if it works.
I suppose it's about decision support rather than this is what you will do. It's about supporting those decisions rather than mandating them.
Gentleman at the background.
I'm Dr. Matthew Bacon. I'm from a company called TCC CaseMix, and we've designed a whole digital flow through surgery. Firstly, we've got systems that have been built on very singular clinical perspectives. And you mentioned earlier that multi-stakeholder perspective was needed, not least of which is the patient. And the patient needs in health are really, really identified as a digital data set. This is a major problem, it seems to me. And the lack of standards around what we call things, and the lack of structure in the data, all those 9 apps that you've got on your mobile phone, nothing joins together because we don't have this common standard. I mean, the NHS back in April 2020 was to adopt a common international ontology called SNOMED. And that has been very poorly affected. And it seems to me, therefore, the big problem that we're confronting at the moment is the lack of understanding what the patient needs out of this process, not their clinical needs, but what the patient needs, and the fact that we can't bring these data sets together for the very problem you identified, the lack of curation. So what do you see at the centre of the system is the answer to solving that problem? Not another big data warehouse or federated databases, but what's the fundamental solution to that fragmentation problem?
Yeah, maybe if I knew that. Yeah. So I think collaboration is important because I get a lot of innovators coming to me with a developed technology and saying, could you please find a solution for this? And I think actually having that collaboration which goes from there to there from the beginning is important. And how does this fit in with the clinical workflow? If you're applying for an IHR grant or something like that, or any of these large grants, you will need to have the patient perception of how this fits in with the clinical workflow, because actually how does this work in the clinical workflow is not just the clinician, that's the patient as well. So it's actually bringing together that whole development into one and thinking about that from the beginning, and that's really hard, particularly when you're a small organisation that's focused on developing a technology. But that's where maybe some of these national bodies and collaboration, talking to people, coming to these sort of meetings, linking through the various groups, can actually help. So that's not a solution, but I think collaboration and talking to a wide group of people is the way to try and use the current system.
From a data standards perspective, it is quite difficult. So I've had some dealings with SNOMED myself, and hospitals don't tend to use it. They use ICD-10 for the diagnoses, and
SNOMED next month. And again, something like that change, for the clinicians that are using it, that it sounds quite simple. You just use the same codes, but actually that is going to be a huge change for us, and is a lot of work to go into it.
You got any thoughts? You got any thoughts on
I think it's like you say, it's the golden nugget, isn't it? We could solve the whole integration thing. The National Programme for IT might have worked in the first place, and you know, I think we're getting better at integration as things are going on. I think people are almost being forced to integrate and work together.
I think that's the only thing you can do, really.
Before, you used to be able to say, we don't message to any other system, they don't message to us. Nobody's going to buy that anymore, and I think we're becoming more demanding around integration, and we should have been from the beginning, but I think we're a bit more powerful on that front.
It hasn't always been those standards, though. Things like Fire are moderately new, and there's the extensions to that for smart apps and things like that are supposed to integrate, make this integration easier.
I'm a cybersecurity analyst. As you mentioned that you are at early stage of designing, the TRE and SDs. I was wondering, have you considered, the adversaries or threat actors? Because, the risk, from cybersecurity point of view, is the unity between the threats, actually the vulnerabilities, and also the assets, So I was wondering, have you considered this?
Yeah, so we haven't really talked about data governance, which probably is a whole meeting in itself, and I think the security, the 5 safes and so forth come into that sort of data governance package. So yeah, that's really high on everyone's agenda. But it's trying to craft a way that enables researchers and those involved in innovation to come in and access information, but without having a security risk there. So yes, and the SDEs is the sort of NHS's answer to having that, to having a very controlled environment where that sort of work can be done, which is of course, the SDE is separate from the routine NHS environment.
But there needs to be flexibility there, so that you could run specific algorithms and you could run kind of pilot programs within that. And I think that's one of the keys, really, that they've got to grasp.
I can just actually give an example from the LLSA. Actually, we're supporting one company that's actually trying to make a data solution app in a certain therapy area. We're actually trying to get access to the data, and they actually won't tell us what data is actually stored in there until we actually go through the whole process. So I know that's slightly a different question, but actually it's almost like padlocked and everything else like that. So we're actually trying to. It's actually part of the project is actually what is the data that's captured in there, and so that they can actually start to look at if their solution will work. So we're trying to forge those links. So that's from just a first principle perspective. Then I think,
and that comes back to data standards as well, because if you don't know you haven't got a metadata description, you don't know what data's there.
I think we can just quickly take one more.
Yeah, hi, I'm Rob Hampton, a doctor from Leicester, and now we're partly in the private sector, drug and alcohol treatment and some medical legal work, and the NHS. And the thing that made me interested to come here today was in the NHS, when I need to see a patient record to make sure I can treat a patient adequately and keep safe, easy, it just happens. If you're in the private sector, it's really hard to get background information to patient safety, particularly in the drug and alcohol clinics I work in, because people come in chaos and not, taking their health very well. And I've looked at ways of trying to get access to data and not succeeded. So the question is, if we have an idea or a problem, how do we come to you as a group and say, I've got a problem here, is there a solution? If there isn't a solution, we look at piloting one in a simple way without having to put a 5-page business case together. How can we have a chat, look at the idea, see what the solutions might be, and then say, can we work on it?
Have a chat with me after. No, genuinely, we're sort of the front door for innovation at the University of Leicester. So this is one of the reasons we've got this event today, is to sort of start discourse around sort of health science data and with the aspiration of starting collaborations. Because from the outside looking in, it's very confusing. It's like, who do you go to at the university? And just come and have a chat, and we can try and sort of assign a to the right people.